Hello and welcome to episode 10 of my Kerbal Career. Today we will be starting off on the launchpad as usual, except this time with the actual drilling component of our base. Now, of course, we won't be able to land this thing just yet, because we do need to repair the base module first and move it. However, we'll be setting this up into a lunar orbit to, of course, just kind of orbit in standby for us to complete the vessel that's actually going to do the repairing, since it's still, of course, being built here. Lunar Base Rescue, it's still got 9 days before it's done building, in which case we can launch it. And then pretty soon after that, our transfer window to Moho will be up. Anyhow, let's throttle up almost all the way, actually all the way. I'm trying to remember how to fly this thing since I did build it a while ago. Now, this bottom piece is the actual, liftoff stage. Now, the real minor piece is just like this green hourglass. This part in the copula module, or cupola. And above that is just kind of the sky crane that will be getting the whole thing down onto the surface of the moon. And of course there is a decoupler right there, which is the bottom of it. And there are landing legs here. So basically an hourglass of a Kethane miner. Let's reset the camera after we wobble it around a little bit. Slow down. I don't want to be going into the Mach zone before I pretty much exit the atmosphere, otherwise bad things will happen to this. As bad things happen to most vehicles that end up going into the Mach zone in atmosphere. So, start gravity turn, at least a little bit. And of course, with all things, just going to speed it along to make things go a bit faster. Now, I had expected the engine to launch, but there, when I decoupled the 4 fuel tanks. However, nothing bad happens, so it's not too much of a problem. Now, this is just the standard gravity turn, highly inefficient because I'm the one doing it. I do need to improve upon my efficiency, as one of these times I'm going to kill a Kerbal from it, and that's probably going to be the learning point, or I'm not going to learn and I'm just going to keep slaughtering Kerbals to my inefficient needs. Now, this particular vessel that I'm launching is actually almost a pointless launch, except poor Jebediah here is going to need some saving. And not just the normal kind of saving, but some very, very lucky kind of saving. Now, in between last episode and this one, version 0.25 has come out, and sadly it has been about 2 weeks since my last episode. I do apologize for that. I've just been having a lot of trouble getting Kerbal Space Program to run, to just actually work. And the biggest issue that I've actually had was the parachute mod, Real Shoots. Its configuration file actually wiped itself clean. I have no idea how it did it, but it managed to wipe itself clean, so it's an empty config file. And the loader couldn't load it, so the loader would freeze loading the last model it could load, which was the Warp plugin Science Bay interior, the space. And when the game is loading, it tells you what it's loading, the current file, and it wouldn't freeze. It would stop loading on that file, and it would just continue to display its little tooltips, treating Kessler syndrome and such, whatever else it says. You've all read it 1,000 times, you probably don't remember either. Repressed memories. And yes, it is repressed when you wait 10 minutes for the game to load with all the mods and such. But I have actually kind of a method of fixing that with OpenGL. Anyway, back to what actually is going on in the game. is... well, I've accomplished an orbit around the moon. Basically, I just got that thing around the moon, and the plan is to land it later. Now what I've got here is the rescue ship that's going to be rescuing the base that kind of slammed down onto the moon's surface and didn't sustain a whole lot of damage. Again, this is just a standard launch by my part, where I do a nice little 360-degree flip and proceed to inefficiently get to orbit. Now, what I was just saying a moment ago was real chutes wiped itself clean, the launcher could not launch itself, and it would freeze there, and I had no idea why. So that basically stopped me from being able to launch Kerbal Space Program for a few days, trying to actually figure out what it was. I had to go by adding one mod at a time to figure out which one broke it, and the real chutes actually loaded half the time, which is why it eluded me for so long. So yeah, I did manage to fix it, and I'm able to load KSP again. And I also force it into OpenGL, so I don't need active texture management, which ironically active texture management will crash my game from lack of RAM if I try to use it, because how it creates the cache. But I just force OpenGL, which is different than DirectX, and it seems to make Kerbal Space Program run better for me, so that's why I use it. If you want to force it, you just have to go into the run parameters, and after the quotations on the location, like a shortcut, create a shortcut for Kerbal Space Program, and after the quotations for the location of the file the shortcut's tied to, you just put a dash force dash OpenGL, no spaces, no caps, and you can run the game in OpenGL. It's quite useful. At least I find it to be better. Of course, other people might have different opinions. What has gone on while I was talking about the game crashing a lot is I launched this thing, I got it into orbit at a 45-degree incline, and I set up a maneuver node for the moon. And I'm going to be doing that launch in a little bit when I go back to the Space Center for a second. So now that we're back here at the Space Center, it's time to talk about a couple of interesting things. One of them being this over here. Now if you don't know what that is, it is a feature of the 0.25 update, where you get the markers near the Kerbal Space Center. So yes, the last launch, and currently I'm running 0.25 because I wanted some of the new features, such as difficulty. I wanted this thing, and basically some of the new features, they were interesting and I wanted to try to update, so I managed to do so. Reputation into science, yes, and I don't want to do all of my reputation, but I want to do a decent chunk of it. 60% seems as though that would work for me. Yeah, since I really have not found a use for reputation, other than of course here, and in 0.24.2, there wasn't a use for it at all that I know of. So I'm just going to convert the majority of the reputation I get into science from contracts. Sure you want to activate this strategy? It can't be modified once activated. Yes, I do. Okay, so we're back out here on this thing, and we're going to be going toward the moon. And since I burned at the wrong angle, at 45 degrees instead of 90, well, the whole thing is actually really off. So I'm going to start my burn at 30 seconds to the node, because I have no idea how long it's actually going to take. I'm probably going to have to stage out of these very high thrust engines before the burn is done. So the burning continues in extremely accelerated format. I'm just playing around with more options that I have with my video editing to, well, see exactly what I can manage to do with it. And one of them is I can actually speed things up more than just 4 times. Now, I've been doing 4 times because it's easier, but I can, upon rare occasion, actually speed it up faster, but I don't know how often I'm going to do it, as it's rather irritating and kind of buggy, laggy even, when I'm trying to actually do some editing. Now, as you noticed in the beginning, I'm trying to add more editing. I got a lot of practice with it from the Kerbal Universe 2 mod spotlight I did, where I edited in a lot of things. But what's going on in the video right now is I'm just landing this rescue mission to look at the base that hit the ground, of course with a little bit of lag, while everything loads into place. But something unexpected happens when I hit the ground. For some reason, I'm getting a very bad feeling about this. And I'm not sure how much of it has to do with the fact that this base piece no longer really exists. And it's kind of floating away. Not kind of, it's completely floating away. And I can't exactly say why. There are the Inferno Robotics pieces. Those are the arms. And it's still missing some pieces. What's weird about it is when I updated to 0.25, I have all the same mods. I actually have a couple more mods. So there's no reason that it shouldn't have loaded. It loaded fine, it didn't give me any compatibility errors, and no parts changed. Yet this thing is floating away, actually. And it's missing some of the components that were attached to it. Okay then. This rescue mission is pointless. A dud. There's no rescuing that can be done at this point if these pieces are going to behave this way. So it looks like I'm just going to drag Ruben Kerman here over toward the other probe and completely rebuild and relaunch that base piece, since it has decided to phase itself out of existence. Welcome to Kerbal Space Program, I guess. I should have expected it. I mean, it's Kerbal Space Program. If it wasn't the update change, then it was something. This is a new texture, isn't it? For the moon. Alright, so I've been busy doing just a few contracts. Now, only 3 of them show up. I don't know what happened to plant a flag or transmit science from Kerbin's orbit, which I just used the old Moho vessel that broke during launch. Now, if you remember, I instated from the 0.25 update, I put in a special method on the economy that basically transfers reputation into science. So I tested a Sabre S engine while splashdown for 213 science plus 7. Sabre M engine while launched, more science. And here's a good example of the reputation and how overpowered it is that I got 66 additional science from science data, or I guess the science data around Kerbin did work. But the plant a flag on the moon did not work. However, if I open up this and take a quick look, okay, I don't have any flag planting there, and I doubt there's one in here. But this would be a good example anyway. As you can see, this one is worth a decent bit of science by itself, but also a huge chunk of reputation, and flag planting is about 500 or so reputation. So I got around 250, 300 science from planting a flag on the moon, and of course I used the previous thing we just landed, which was supposed to rescue the base, but the base broke due to scaling issues, which is why we actually needed another craft to kind of fix those. Of course, that's just one of the problems with updating from 0.24.2 to 0.25, but I really wanted this building right here, the agency thing, just because of the active strategies. They're really overpowered, and I want to abuse them very hard. Anyhow, I'm currently sitting on almost 850 science, so it is time to buy stuff. And I've already got planned out what I want. I want this science node, particularly for the command modules, as well as the fact that it just gives me a ton of parts, along with, of course, being a prerequisite to some of the stuff further down the line. So what I've got here now is basically 2 nuclear reactors with 2 electrical engines. I'm not sure if an electrical engine can keep up with 2 reactors by itself, so I just put it at a 1-1 set. And what this is going to be doing is basically, this is the start of, well, this is going to be acting as the start for interstellar power. Now this is going to help me launch things, more so than actually travel them around the solar system. But it's still going to be incredibly useful. And I lacked those nice giant side wheels, so I'm just using a couple of plain wheels. And the 2 forward ones are actually on backwards, so I have to steer in reverse. Now, I don't want to flip this thing, but I do want to move it away from the launch pad a little bit and kind of in between the launch pad and the spaceplane hangar. So, this area is my destination. Now, of course, this will probably be able to transmit power validly for things trying to launch out of the Kerbal Space Center, as well as things in orbit around Kerbin, as long as they have view of the Space Center. But it's mostly just to test how much power things use. I haven't used Interstellar a huge amount, so I guess I'm not entirely certain. However, I do know it's significantly lighter to put a receiver than a fission generator or any nuclear kind of generator and power generator. And since this thing will be transmitting it with this giant array up top, then I will be able to just retrieve power. Also, I have no idea how many radiators I needed, so I packed plenty. Or if this thing's going to even generate a whole ton of power. So I'm just going to individually deploy all these, and I'm going to set this. Are these working? 25%. Yeah, there's no theoretic. Okay, so this can generate 3 gigawatts of power. That's not bad. Go away. Control window. There we go. This is what I wanted to look at. So this will last for over 2,000 days. I'm not going to actually open this thing up because I know when I open it, because I've tested this before, these 2 generators are going to go up to 50% and I don't want to start burning fuel unnecessarily. So I'm just going to leave it the way it is, and I'll open it up when I get my first craft that actually has the possibility to launch. So, done with this for now. And I believe the next thing that's on the list is definitely going to have to be the Moho mission yet again. Version 2 with a few SRBs, or not SRBs, but Sepatron. So the time has finally come to use this vessel again, and the Moho everything as it's called. Now everything's exactly the same, other than the added feature of a pair of Sepatrons on each one of these, so we don't have the same problem as last time. And I'm a little bit frightened for this particular vessel, seeing as how the launch clamps are indeed missing. My guess is those are from the 0.25 update and the fact that I didn't replace them. I literally just pushed launch on this thing. I didn't even go to the editor, so everything appears to be normal and working. Aside, of course, from the launch clamps. Let's hope nothing happens, like spontaneous explosions, for example, which is what I'm honestly expecting. In which case I would probably just restart, because this is indeed an updated flight, and I think I can use that as a pretty safe example. Let's launch. And they work nicely, so no problems there. I'm very glad about that, actually. And now we just have a couple of stages to get through, and we will be safely in orbit, where I can no longer worry about this thing spontaneously breaking for the second time, in which I would just end up using nuclear rockets, because I already have the one power plant down there, and by the time Moho comes back into view, I'd have one in orbit. So, first stage is about to happen. This can't be good. Let's see how it works. So I'm just gonna throttle up all the way. And there we go, clean staging. Those two parts are not going to destroy the engine today, unlike last time. So that means we are already quite a bit ahead of the game from last trial. And now it's just about changing my velocity vector and trying to get this thing into orbit using hopefully just this stage and possibly the next one for orbit. Which means starting to go into a gravity turn pretty steeply. Now of course if I go too much into a gravity turn, I'll lose all control of this, because I am using Ferrum and it likes to do things like that. And I don't really want to flip this one around, because I'm almost certain this thing will snap right off. And for once in Kerbal Space Program, I've actually managed to do a pretty efficient gravity turn. Normally my apoapsis is sitting somewhere between 150, or not 150, 120 and 150. This time I'm actually sitting around 80, which isn't bad, 70 being, of course, the most efficient, but 80 being better than 120 by a long shot. So, as usual, just going to check my velocity. I need to be going about 400 meters per second more, and this next stage should be able to do just that for me, in order, of course, to get into a stable orbit. One way you can check to make sure you actually have the correct altitude, or not altitude, speed, is going to Surface in your Flight Engineer or MechJeb and looking at your horizontal speed. Basically 2 kilometers per second is about what you need to get an orbit. And of course this orbit mixes in with your vertical velocity, so it doesn't really help determine if you're in a stable orbit or not. So at 2 kilometers per second horizontal velocity, and I'm almost in a stable orbit. There we go. 2.060 kilometers per second is a stable orbit, and of course there is vertical speed, which alters as I go around my orbit, whether or not I'm going up or down. So this isn't always 100% accurate. So at this point I am just going about planning a maneuver node to Moho, as the launch window is calculated to be about 2 to 3 days away. So I'm actually just going to be burning now because it's close enough and I have more than enough fuel to correct any mistakes I have. So I managed to create a node for an initial burn. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 passes for this node. I'm going to burn out all of the fuel in this stage right here and start the next stage. And then what I'm going to do is... Holy cow, what the hell was that? What broke? That's all I care about. Did anything important break? Stack decouplers. Okay, so it doesn't look like anything broke. The engine works. I'm not missing any fuel tanks or landing gear struts. Okay, so it just looks like when the thing broke and the fairings came off, that was all that really managed to break. Now, I'm not doing the entire burn right now. I'm just doing part of it, and I'm going to come around in orbit and do the next part. Since it's close enough to the transfer window, I believe that, yeah, 2 days from now, it's close enough. That's even just a rough calculation by itself. But this burn is going to take somewhere around... Well, that didn't help. This burn is going to take a couple minutes in itself. So I'm just trying to get a head start on that. Like 5 minutes to burn. That's when I'm going to cut off. And of course, just some more hyperspeed video editing. I go around the Kerbal 1 time and then I proceed to burn and complete the maneuver node. Now, because I clicked the increase orbit by 1 on the maneuver node, it didn't update to the new amount of delta V I wanted it to, so I just tweaked it until it was the way I needed it to be. And of course, I burn, I use a little bit of time acceleration, and after the 1600 delta V, I managed to complete my maneuver node and start playing around with the next one so that I can get my encounter with Moho. Alright, so I managed to get an encounter actually. Just playing around with maneuver nodes a bit. And that encounter is going to be in 144 Kerbal days. There we go. We have officially left Kerbal for the first time. And this is Casper, who has done such a feat. Now, if everything goes our way, Casper will not end up the ghost you may know him to be, but a living, breathing Kerbal. Or at least I assume they breathe. Very little is known about the Kerbal kind, to be honest. Anyhow, I am just collecting some science from this vessel, as it is its purpose to collect all forms of science, and I have plenty of instruments to do just that. And of course, once I've gathered what I can, and of course it becomes time to start setting up timing a maneuver node, so I know when to burn on my maneuver node. 54 days, okay. So, now I have an alarm set. I don't need the transfer window anymore because I've already done it. Yeah. So, I guess this will be the end of episode 10, I hope. So, I thank you all for watching. I'm PTTGRW, signing out.